Greetings in the Lord Jesus. I'm glad to be here with you. It's always an honor. And as I always do, and I say that, is I want to welcome in the Wisdom Warriors. They are so special to me, and I know they are special to the Lord, and the nation needs them at this time. The same thing with intercessors throughout the Great Eagle and in other nations that have joined us and are praying and interceding. We're so grateful. And the same for the members of the National War Council and those that make donations that help and make this possible. We never forget it. And we always want to have a humility about it and a genuine appreciation for what you do. The Bereans, yeah, I always welcome my Bereans. Today, like any time I start off, is going to be a little different, but you know, what's different about that? So welcome in the Bereans. Today, you'll have a chance to take some different notes. And like I had to this week, or it's strange how it was. I'll explain in a minute, just some time to look into these. I always want you to look for the scripture and when I provide the scriptures, and then research when you can. Those that still want prayer, especially during this season, we're receiving a lot of prayer about family and friends, and certainly those that have been affected by the virus. You're on our heart. We have nightly devotion and pray. And for others that want to reach us, you can do so at the National War Council, Post Office Box 931, Argyle, Texas, 76226. A little short ways out of Dallas. So I'll try to get started on this one. It was unusual. This week I had, I try to listen to the Lord and kind of, he directs me and what he wants me to talk about and exactly how to proceed in that. And I told Kimberly during the week, there's a lot of things I can talk about. And she told me, said, honey, you have visions and words and teachings. I said, I know, but I can't give those unless the Lord tells me to, and he hasn't told me anything yet. So I gave the broadcast on Thursday, and that night when we had our devotion and went to my private time about 9:30. I didn't sleep the whole night. It was, I think I got up at 3:30 or something like that, made myself a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and sat there and prayed a little bit longer, and came back to bed and was still awake when Kimberly got up at 5:30. So I was exhausted. That next night, Kimberly and Luke, we did our devotion. They came upstairs, and we're going to let Dad get to sleep at 7 o'clock, which I was very grateful for. And I went into my private time thinking it would just be for a period just to pray for the ones that are on my heart and anything else he may bring to my mind. And then within about 20-25 minutes, he started speaking to me and showing me things. And I believe that Kimberly came to bed about 9 o'clock, and I had gone into the my room and wrote different notes that I do at night, went back to bed, got up, wrote notes, went back to bed. And she said, "You're still awake?" I said, "Yeah, I'll tell you and Luke about it tomorrow." So I had a chance to prepare for just like 2 days, but that's okay. I will present what he presented to me. Normally, when he gives me a vision, a lot of times he just gives me the vision and explains what we're seeing, and then gives me a separate prophetic word. Sometimes he wants me to release the prophetic word. At other times, he asks me to keep them to myself until he releases me. This was unusual because it had a little bit of both in it. So I'm going to take you through the sequence that he took me in and read close to my notes that I can. So pay special attention and take notes. And if you need to go back and listen to it again. There is a deeper meaning in the visions that he gives to me. There's usually 3 or 4 levels, and a lot of people just look at the surface and they either dismiss it or they understand it, but there's always like an undercurrent in all that he does. So this was the Friday night I was supposed to sleep at 7 o'clock, and it's called The Root of Evil. I'll read this and then show you some pictures. As I was laying down, the Lord appeared and softly spoke. As the men of Shinar, Shinar, devised iniquity and boasted of their wicked tower, there is an evil root of destruction deep in the soil of the eagle. It was then, so it is now, deceivers and reprobates of the fallen one. I'll stop there for just a second. When he mentioned Shinar, I thought about it the next day, and I knew he was talking about Nimrod and the Tower of Babel. He'll tell you something, and the Holy Spirit will bring back to your remembrance the things that you've read and studied. He said, what has been then is so again. So he's telling me something that's going to repeat itself often more than once. There's an evil root of destruction deep in the soul of the eagle. The eagle is what he he tells me when he's talking about the United States of America. There are other times he calls it my covenant nation. And those that do not believe it's a covenant nation, I respect your opinion. I happen to believe what he tells me and the history of Reverend Hunt and going back to 1607. As it was then, so it is now. Deceivers and reprobates, spawn of the fallen one. Sons of perdition who say, the Lord does not see us. The Lord has forsaken the land. So he usually doesn't go into those things. He usually takes me directly into a vision and just explains them to me. But he started this off by telling me, taking me back to a scriptural truth that is in the Word. So the next thing that happened, it was early evening, the sun was setting when we were standing in a cemetery. He was standing to my left, and we were in a cemetery, and I could see dusk was coming, but I could still see, but I knew it would be dark soon. So we were standing in a cemetery. As I said, the Lord stood to my left and was silent. There were old headstones in all directions, as the atmosphere, the spiritual dimension, was filled with demonic activity. Over this cemetery, it was a tremendous amount of demonic activity over it. When the Lord came and I was with him, they pushed back as far back, I guess, as the cemetery went. And as I could tell, the cemetery was acres and acres and acres. I couldn't see the end of it in any direction. So let me say, they quickly moved to the far ends of the area, acres and acres. As we walked through the gravel pits, these were at that time, I'll speak about, he said without speaking, look carefully and note the markings. These headstones were tremendous in size, and I'll show you examples of what they were. And I had seen similar things in all the years I had lived in Louisiana, the times that we had gone to New Orleans when my mother would take us to Lake Pontchartrain and things, that I remembered those cemeteries out there and how massive they were. And on the headstones, it was, they weren't real clean. They were like a green algae or a fungus, or I don't know what it was. Some of them were like broken and tilted. So when I looked at them, they looked to be, very, very old. And I'll read some of the things, because he said, I want you to, and we walked a little ways down this looking. He said, look carefully and note the markings. I believe I said behind us to our left was a building over. It wasn't like a building. It resembled more of a structure or like a house, but it kind of looked like a chapel. But I could see it, and it was in the graveyard over to our left. And when we walked back, I was looking directly at it. Many of the headstones, and this is what he wanted me to see, many of the headstones had the all-seeing eye, the eye with all the stuff around it, like you see on a dollar bill above the pyramid, Masonic emblems. There were quite a few that had a skull with bones beneath it. And I don't know if that referred to skull and bones or if it was just some type of satanic thing. There were serpents, a lot of serpents and gargoyles. Some of these houses looked like structures were like houses. The site was so big, had gargoyles either on two corners, and some of them had on four corners. Some had engravings of soldiers with scripture, and then quite a few had cherubim or angelic-looking statues, with them. One of the tallest structures to my left was like a building, and there were different types of statues in front of it, more like you would see that dog-looking thing in front of a pyramid, and on the top of it, it sat was a live owl. It was like looking at us, and so when we were walking, and I was looking at all of these headstones, I looked and saw that thing, and the Lord didn't say anything. He just, we walked. When I was looking at the different ones and then walking through, the dates on the headstones were very old, with many of the dates ending within a few year period, like 1860, 1863, 64. There were some with 1865. So a lot of those were in that period of time. And it was pretty dismal looking. So I'll show you this. You can see my notes when Kimberly said, "No, you didn't sleep on Thursday night. It was Friday. He gave you the vision. You told us on Saturday." So from Saturday until now is the only time I had to pray over it and ask the Lord about it and prepare it. So that it was dusk. It was starting to get dark, and I knew before long it'd be dark. So that was the graveyard. When I was looking at different things, and you can see this, these are actual headstones, by the way. These are. You can see that all-seeing eye thing, a moon and stars and the sun, God Ra, Nanar. These are the different keys and emblems of this. You can see this. Some of them had the Masonic image. You can see a star with serpents on it. There's that skull and bones. So these were taken from actual graves. And when I looked after, the vision was over, I knew that, and I found that this was a old cemetery with Civil War people buried in it during that period of time, statesmen and Civil War officers and others that was in Metairie, part of New Orleans. So this is what it looked like. This is that house-looking thing that was to our left. Like I said, it wasn't exactly that. It looked like an old house, but it had structure to it. But whether it's a chapel or, but you can see these headstones, and this is where, you walk down this thing, and all these paths at that time were gravel and grass. And there were sections that had this whole area lined out. And, I could see that, walk through here, and there were names on here of soldiers and whatever their, regiment was. And I went, I really didn't understand why I was there, but this is what we saw, and then I think I had that owl was sitting on top of one of these structures like this, just looking at us as we walked, down the thing. The Lord didn't say anything, but I noticed it. And it wasn't a regular owl; it was a large owl. And when I see owls like that, I immediately think of Bohemian Grove and that group out there that sacrifices at that thing. So to see those emblems, I'm not going to go into Kimberly, go in much detail, but I do want you to know that I'm going to show you these pictures and comment on it. I've seen the dark, the evil side. Even if I were to tell you parts of it, you wouldn't, many wouldn't believe it. If I got into the depth of it, it certainly is unbelievable that human beings could or would do that. But for people that, and I believe this is the whole part of the vision, people that take the satanic ceremony, and they have ceremonies for the blood oath initiation into the satanic bloodlines, the things they have to do at that period of time are reprehensible. And like I said, most people wouldn't believe it, especially people that are billions and billions and Rothschilds and others trillions. I believe Rothschild at one time said he was worth 500 trillion. So even those numbers, you say, Jim, that can't be possible. Research it and look at it. But not only do they take an oath, fame, fortune, and power, this is a lifetime oath. You take this oath, you are binding all generations after you, children, grandchildren, unless someone breaks that through the blood of Jesus Christ. And those that are watching that have been in this and have been saved know what I'm talking about. Every year you have to repledge your blood oath with certain things you have to bring and certain things you have to do. Drinking blood is that's elementary for them. That's nothing. But Lucifer, he committed treason. He rebelled. And so he understands that, and he knows rebellion and he knows treason because he's the one that started it. So for those that are in his service, even through bloodlines, you have to annually rededicate yourself, and you are monitored by evil spirits, demons throughout your life, and so is your family. So when you see these things on these grave sites, snakes and all seeing eye and pyramids and skull and bones, there were other things, gargoyles and others that I didn't take, but I want you to understand that in order for many of them to have power, fame, and fortune, they have to do things. They sell their soul, and then they do things in this ritual and following it. So I want you to keep that in mind, because there is a society that is so perverted, so demonic, that I think I have mentioned to you before to go and look at one of the Rothschild parties or some of those with, and I believe I had shared Callister, the Alex, the witch's brew, and I won't even, it's so disgusting, get into that. So the vision continued. We were in the cemetery, and I had looked at that. I don't know how long we were in there, and I understood what he wanted me to see. So the scene changed, and we were standing in a field again as nightfall approached. I could see again, night was coming, but I could still see. Again, as in the cemetery, there was an eerie feeling about the place. I was thinking, wonder why we're here, and I'm just like you or anyone else. It's like, all right, I was in a cemetery and now I'm here. And over the years, it's been 45 years, but especially the last 20, I've come to know his voice. I know we used to, when I first started, he would talk verbally to me so I would understand. Now we communicate a lot of times non-verbally. And when I think something like that, I'm not really aware at that time, but he knows everything you're thinking. Um, and he said, in response to my unspoken thought, he said, "This is the field where so much innocent blood was shed." I should have grasped it from being in the cemetery, but Cajun, maybe, I don't know. When brother will fight against brother and unblemished ground is soaked in their blood. So he was saying, this is the first, apologize, I back up. This is the field where so much innocent blood was shed. And he said with sadness, he continued, this is the first, but not the last. When brother will fight against brother and the unblemished ground is soaked in their blood. So he was telling me, this is the first, but it's not going to be the last where brother would fight against brother and shed blood. As flashes of the battle flooded in my spirit, when I was standing there, I started seeing different images of the battle that had taken place. The sadness overwhelmed me as I wept over the loss of so many. Teenage boys, grown men. When he brings you to a place like that, or when you're with him, your heart has been broken and humbled, and when you see things like that, there are atrocities and things that are wrong, and you have those feelings. But when there's loss of life and people die, and he shows me things, same thing with the concentration camps in North Korea, I feel such a sadness. There were hundreds of Black people in non-combat support roles. They were all over the field dead. You could, though the bodies were so many in some of the scenes, there wasn't much space between them. You could just about walk on bodies and walk across the field without touching the ground. But I knew when I saw this, these Black people were not in any type of uniform. Not that the Union had decent looking uniforms. I mean, had boots and regular stuff, but there was a lot of the Confederate soldiers that were just worn, raggedy looking stuff, and a lot of them didn't have any shoes on. But they were both, and he said brother against brother, and so I knew that he was talking about relatives and in-laws and others that fought sadly against each other. I knew that these were in support roles of ambulance, because several of them were dead besides stretchers and ambulance, supply wagon drivers, hospital attendants, and personal body servants. You could see that next to, in the South, a lot of the different officers, there were 2 or 3 Black men that were killed, and several were young teenagers that died beside this person. He touched me, and a comfort spread through my spirit after I'd been from sadness weeping. He spoke softly, and he said, I weep over the loss of innocent life. And people probably don't know that about him, and they think, as God, he's unemotional and he knows all things. He does know all things, but he wept over Jerusalem when he told Jerusalem, when he prophesied over it, said, how many times would I have gathered you together as a hen does her chicks? So he laughs, he has joy, he sings, he can whistle, but he also has great compassion and sorrow. And he said, I weep over the loss of innocent life. And he doesn't mean only on this battlefield. He said, these are pawns who fight for justice and the freedom of man. When he used that word man instead of the freedom of men, I knew that he meant man and women and children that deserved to have their freedom and liberty, and justice was not served. He said, but these people that are fighting their pawns, even though the cause is just and it's a right cause, he said, yet these are pawns in a greater scheme, is what I knew he was alluding to. And yeah, I'll pick it up. Yet the root of evil is much more treacherous. Discord and war are the wiles of evil for wealth, power, and the destruction of evil. So, and I'll finish this out. You were given my strength and courage to speak and show my people the deception of this dark season, the plans and transgressions of the blood oath, those who take the blood oath. High level society has that one world government thing and point of 1,000 lights or whatever it was. Transgressions of the blood oath, who planted the seed of destruction. So they planted a seed of destruction to entrench, which I thought that word that he used was interesting, to entrench. And I thought of the word seed that he used and also the root. He's always, he can, his words are precise. And when he says it, it relates exactly to what he's talking about. So when he says entrenched, it reminded me of a military term, entrenching, but of a seed and of a root. Yet the root of evil is much more treacherous. Discord and war are the wiles of evil for wealth, power, and the destruction of the evil. You were given my strength and courage to speak and show my people the deception of this dark season, the plans and transgressions of the blood oath, of those of blood oath, who planted the seed of destruction to entrench the dominion of the pernicious one, the dominion of the pernicious one, the rule of the evil one, Satan. So this is all to bring about the end times, where this pernicious one will rule with, as the Antichrist, the beast, and the false prophet, and they think that they will be victorious. My long suffering and patience for the wicked is coming to an end, while grace has been extended for a short period to those who call on my name. Reveal what you are allowed and speak what is permissible for this hour. The vision ended. This is what it looked like. It was dark, and then the scenes kept coming to me. I realized I was at Gettysburg. In the Civil War. I will read a couple things and show you, I think, the deeper lessons in it. The Civil War is the central event in America's historic consciousness. While the Revolution of 1776 through 1783 created the United States, believe me, the United States was created because, as I have talked about, the divine founding, Christopher Columbus was led here by the Holy Spirit, Reverend Robert Hunt, and so many others that made the covenant in 1607 up in the Chesapeake Bay or Jamestown. The society, the One World Group, did not want America formed. They had England with their king and France, and they had a particular leader of a large church, all under their authority. And, the creation of the United States of America was not what they wanted, and they opposed it. And so where they supported England financially in every way they could to destroy the original 13 colonies in the Revolutionary War. The Civil War of 1861, and these are the dates, a lot of them were on those headstones, of 1861 through 1865, determined what kind of nation it would be. The American Civil War was the largest and most destructive conflict in the Western world between the end of the Napoleonic War in 1815 and the onset of World War I in 1914. Of all those wars together, and I'll get into this, keep in mind that after the war, and I'll read some of this, 5 days after Lee surrendered, and I'll give some background on it, is when President Lincoln was assassinated by an individual that we'll talk about. I'm going to read this. And the Battle of Gettysburg, where he took me to look at, and he said, this was the first, but not the last, where brother would fight against brother and shed innocent blood. The Battle of Gettysburg is perhaps the most well-known battle of the Civil War because it was the bloodiest battle of the war. It was fought from July 1st to July 3rd, 1863 in Gettysburg on a large open field. The Confederate Army of about 75,000 soldiers was commanded by General Robert E. Lee, and the Union Army of around 82,000 was led by General George Meade. By the end of the fighting, there were just over 28,000 Confederate casualties and 23,000 Union casualties. Over 7,000 men lost their lives in 3 short days, with a total of just over 51,000 casualties. The Union Army claimed victory. These were soldiers. This was not those that I had mentioned earlier, the casualties of civilians, or not even civilian, of slaves and others that were used, but they were paid also from the North. They were free, and they were paid as teamsters to drive wagons and to provide medical help. So there were some on both sides, one being free and paid and fighting for their brothers in the South, and then those on the other side. I'm born in Louisiana, but I love men and women and children, and I know that it was a dark stain on our nation, but it was not. This was carried out, and I'll show you how. I'll show you a picture, then get more into that. The Irish Memorial is dedicated to the 600 members of the Irish Brigade that fought in Gettysburg in the Civil War and were either wounded or killed. At the feet of the Celtic Cross lies one of their mascots, a faithful Irish wolfhound. This is one of the grave headstones. Many of these were like this in New Orleans, some on horses. This is the memorial for the 600 Irish Brigade. It is at Gettysburg. Sure, I'm getting all my notes. Civil War began in 1861, when the Confederate Army opened up on Fort Sumner in South Carolina. Throughout 4 years of intense fighting, there were approximately 625,000 total deaths in the Civil War. The number of casualties, however, was much higher. Cities and towns were burnt down, unheard of things done to civilians when so many men on both sides went to war. It says a casualty is a person who is either killed, wounded, or goes missing during a war. While there were more than 600,000 deaths in the American Civil War, casualties are estimated to be close to 1.5 million people. Approximately 475,000 people, including both civilians and soldiers, were wounded during the war, while an additional 400,000 are listed as missing. The war concluded in 1865, but the following years of war loomed in the shadow of the defeat of the Confederate States. And we know for years they carried on a war in the South. Growing up in the South, and I can remember coming home from the Marine Corps and having a friend with me, and well, on one of the bumper stickers, and a lot of those, it was "We shall rise again." Others, "This ain't over yet." So, and there were other things that just surprised me. So when these people put brother against brother, and they're safe in their ivory towers in other countries, these people pay the price. The cause was just, but this is not only what it was about for these evil satanic bloodlines, and I'll get into that. Also, at that time, I want you to understand what is taking place then is taking place now, and I shared that with you in the Drums of War. I'm going to touch back on the Drums of War, Thunderdome, and the tree that had the American flags on it, I hope so, on Thursday, to give you an update on those. And before the end of the year, hopefully, some of the things the Lord has shown me for what He'll allow me to for 2022. The American Civil War, the Union told all the European countries if they recognized the Confederacy's legitimacy, it was equal to declaring war against the Union. This neutrality, for the most part, however, did not keep European countries from participating in various ways. At one point, actually several times, the French tried to persuade Britain to recognize the Confederacy. And in many aspects, it would have made sense, especially for the British who lost the Revolutionary War and were under threat of punishment from the society that rules all of those people. So let me cover Great Britain and a few others. At one point, France tried to persuade, as I said, and Great Britain relied heavily on the South for its cotton to power its textile factories. That's one of the needs they had. However, the British had massive quantities of cotton piled up to last through an extended period of time for shipments that may be stopped because of the war. More importantly, because they had just stockpiles of cotton, more importantly, they needed the Union corn. They needed the corn from the northern states more than they needed the cotton, to the extent that the British openly talked about how long they could actually wage a war against the U.S., the northern part, before they would start to run out of simple food, because the U.S. had cut it off from the South, and if they went to war against the North, their food supplies would be cut off, they were thinking. They were worried also, if Britain recognized the Confederacy, and therefore the Union was against them, they may lose Canada. They weren't worried about. They were worried about losing Canada, worried about their food. Also, the Union would harm British merchant ships and possibly cut off supplies of American-produced food products. And that's what they're concerned about. For these reasons, Great Britain remained neutral and was able to work out a deal of continuous trade with both sides. So they worked out both sides. The trade with the Confederacy fell cotton 90% after the beginning of the war. All the ships for the Confederacy were used for the war and bringing in munitions. Only a little cotton was able to get to England, and a few munitions made it back, weapons, ammo made it to the Confederate ports. One controversy that occurred between the Union and Great Britain was the building of two Confederate warships at a British shipyard. The Union was very opposed to this, and after the war, they received $15.5 million in arbitration for the damages caused by the two warships. So they built, it's not about the money, it's about power. They built two warships for the Confederacy, and the Union, Lincoln and they said, they were playing both sides, and they did. So on to France. While France remained technically neutral, they weren't technically neutral, just like Great Britain. It did considerable siding with the Confederacy, that's for sure. However, France could not do so and enter a war with the Union without the British backing. They weren't the power that Britain was at the time. This is why France repeatedly tried to convince Great Britain to join them in the Confederate endeavor. The French wanted not only the cotton the South provided, but they also had an interest in creating, here we go, an empire in Mexico. They thought they could more easily take the region with Confederate help. So there's the French. They had slaves themselves. Wasn't popular in France, but they had slaves. The people of France were entirely in agreement. The Confederacy was endorsed by those also that supported Napoleon III, who was in power, and the Roman Catholics. The only ones that opposed it were the French Republicans. So those that supported Napoleon III, which he was in power, and the Roman Catholic Church supported going and helping the southern states, the Confederates. Ironic, during the war, the Union cut off the supply of cotton to France, causing what was known as the cotton famine in France. Their intelligence confirmed, the French for the British confirmed that the French were supporting and assisting the South. Down to Mexico and two others. Some Mexicans indeed wanted the French to use Confederate influence to create a gateway to Mexico. These Mexico conservatives thought the French would take care of the current liberal Mexican president. It's always a subterfuge going on. Supplies gifted from France to the Confederacy, arriving from overseas, traveled overland via Mexico and into Texas. Russia. At that time, relations between the United States and Russia were relatively peaceful. Russia was the only country in Europe to offer assistance to the Union. They did it verbally. They never did anything, but they verbally offered assistance. This was because they felt aligning themselves with the Union would help them if they ever needed the backing against Great Britain. The Russian Navy sent 2 fleets to American waters just in case Great Britain and France joined the war. They stayed there for 7 months. They didn't do anything, but they stayed there. And then lastly, the Union was actively looking for places to send freed slaves who no longer wished to stay in the United States. So they were free to come up from the South and said, we don't want to stay here. So a top choice was the Netherlands. The Union was considering sending free slaves to colonize in a Dutch-owned town in the Netherlands at the time. However, it was never implemented. So let me move into another part of the Civil War. And it's like today, the drums of war. Back then, there was a coalition. That coalition planted seeds of destruction to destroy the great eagle, the United States of America. They did this by pitting brother against brother. The cause was just, and it was right. Slavery is an abhorrent thing, and we should have never had that blemish on us. But it was a fact, and I believe that we have come a long ways. We're not there yet, but we have come a long ways. But I do not embrace the stuff that's going on today. I embrace what Martin Luther King did. So let me read this and then show you another slide. The Knights of the Golden Circle, KGC, was a secret society. Boy, these secret societies. You have founded in 1854 by American George Bickley, Bickley. The objective of which was to create a new country known as the Golden Circle. In Spanish, it's CIRCULO DORADO, the Golden Circle, where slavery would be legal. The country would have been centered in Havana and would have consisted of the southern United States and a golden circle of territories in Mexico, which was to be divided into 25 new slave states, Central America and northern parts of South America, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, most other islands in the Caribbean, about 2,400 miles worth in diameter. So they wanted the Confederates to win so they could launch this new Golden Circle, and it would be basically a slavery nation. Originally, the KGC advocated that the new territories should be annexed by the United States in order to vastly increase the number of slave states, and thus the power of the slave-holding Southern upper class. But the money, not only money they made in slave trade, the money they made in produce in the South. In response to the increased anti-slavery agitation that followed the Dred Scott decision in 1857, the Knights changed their position. The Southern United States should succeed, forming their own confederation, and then invade and annex the area of the Golden Circle to vastly expand the power of the South. In the United States, the new country's northern border would roughly coincide with the Mason-Dixon line, and within it were included such cities as Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Mexico City, and Panama City. This is another part that was working with the Confederates, and they received gold from many different nations. Several of those shipments of gold were destroyed during storms at sea, and in the southern part, hurricanes. And you have treasure hunters even today looking for some of the Spanish gold, some of the gold from the other nations that I mentioned. And I'll get into this other piece in just a second. So I want to show those to you, and then I'll read this to you. Picture of Knights of the Golden Circle. This is the map proposal of the Golden Circle in dark green. Light green designates the remains of the United States, their flag and their emblem. And I'll tell you about this in just a second. This group was controlled by the Committee of 13, and that number is, you'll find it in the dark structure, 13. Satan is a forger. He's an imposter. Those things that he saw how the kingdom was set up with thrones and how Jesus had his 12 disciples, with Jesus being the 13th. You will see that repeated throughout secret societies, and from the structure from beneath and the structure from above in the dark realm down to the earth and the structure that's on the earth. They have different groups, 70 and 30 and 120 and 500. There's different groups of levels that control around the world. So I'm going to read this. Plans to seize Lincoln and inaugurate Breckinridge as president. I'm reading this because this is similar to today. And people say there's no deep state. There has always been a deep state as long as the United States was formed as the 13 colonies at that time. This is during the Civil War, and this was a plan by the Golden Circle to seize Lincoln and insert the president. So this is in history. You can look it up. Several members of President James Buchanan's administration were members of the order, as well as Virginia's secessionist, Senator James M. Mason. The Secretary of War, John Floyd, and the Treasurer, Hal Cobb, were members of the Circle, in addition to Vice President John Breckinridge. You think that's unusual? Maybe you need to look at past administration, what happened on January the 6th. Floyd received instructions from the order to seize Navy yards, forts, and other areas, while KGC members were still cabinet officers and senators. The plan was to prevent Lincoln from reaching Washington by capturing him in Baltimore. Then they would occupy the District of Columbia and install Breckinridge as president instead of Lincoln. Floyd used his position as Secretary of War to move munitions, ammo, and men to the South towards the end of Buchanan's presidency. Buchanan and then Lincoln. His plot was discovered and led to greater distrust of secret societies and copperheads, Copperheads in general. This distrust was the result of a confirmed plot to overthrow the federal government rather than general discontent. So there was an evil, a nefarious, discreet, secret group. Very few people have heard, the Golden Circle. This is the group that had persuaded John Wilkes Booth. John Wilkes Booth and just a handful of people are not the only ones involved in this. And you can also look at what happened in Dallas, 1963. So there is and I have all the pages, I'm not going to get into all those. So let me read this. Conventional wisdom has held that Booth and a small group of thuggish accomplices committed the heinous act and the attempt to kill Secretary of State William Seward alone. This is almost from 10 years ago, but evidence is slowly emerging that the decapitation, as it's called, plot and execution came at the behest of a much larger, more organized cabal, the Knights of the Golden Circle. And the Knights of the Golden Circle are puppets, puppeteers of a larger or more nefarious evil group. Few Americans have ever heard of KCG, the subversive Confederate underground that operated with paramilitary cells in both the North and South. To point a finger at them now sounds like a conspiracy theory, talking about over the years. But the fact is the U.S. government, specifically the War Department's office of the Judge Advocate General, itself had been hot on the heels of the KGC during the war, and every captured conspirator in the Lincoln assassination trials was questioned intensely by the Bureau of Military Justice about involvement in the secret society. So why would the Lord have me go to the cemetery and then the Civil War and show me? He said, this is the first, but not the last, brother against brother. And I'll cover that in a minute, of what we see today. And as I said, the drums of war, Thunderdome, and things that he's prophetically given me to speak. Many people don't want to hear about it, dismiss it, but the Lord does give his prophetic people to warn the people. Ronald Reagan. Younger Ronald Reagan, 1961. Khrushchev, Castro, Khrushchev, Chinese leader. Show this to you again. Why want to show this to you? I'm going to read this, and this is an excerpt out of a book called Encroaching Control. I don't study Ronald Reagan, but I have a friend in Arizona. She is probably one of the premier experts in the country on it. So let me quote this, and you can see this at, and I'll show you the YouTube URL. Standing before the Phoenix Chamber of Commerce on March 30, 1961, Ronald Reagan gave a 45-minute speech covering topics from farming and education to universal medical care and communism. Elements of encroaching control are shared with other speeches he gave at the same time, including A Time for Choosing. I'm quoting this. The communists are supremely confident of victory. They believe that you and I, Ronald Reagan speaking, under the constant pressure of the Cold War, will one by one, give up our democratic traditions and principles and customs. Read that again. Will one by one give up our democratic traditions, principles, and customs. Only temporarily, of course, but only temporarily we will turn to totalitarian tactics and methods just for the purpose of opposing the enemy being those that do not go along with this. Does it sound familiar today? And then they cynically believe we will one day awake to find that we have, in adopting these tactics, become so much like the enemy that the causes for conflict have disappeared between us. 3.5 months before his last visit to this country, Nikita Khrushchev said, quoting Nikita Khrushchev, "We can't expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until one day they awaken to find themselves and they have communism." Nikita Khrushchev, the same one that said, "We will take America without firing a shot. We do not have to invade the United States. We will destroy you from within." There's debate on the quote of this, and there happens to be, of all people, a high-level Latter-day Saint principle, which call themselves elders and apostles, that he's now deceased, but he had confirmed that he hosted Nikita Khrushchev showing farming and other things. He said in their private discussion, he made this exact statement. I don't know. But I know that when we look at this and their strategy, We can't expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist. Oh, they assist their elected leaders. You can think of who they are today, many of them. Just like in the Civil War, they had outside interference from other countries. The Golden Circle had those directing them and provided gold and silver, ammunition, all the supplies they need, medical supplies, to fight the war. So we can't expect the American people to jump from capitalism to communism, but we can assist their elected leaders in giving them small doses of socialism until one day they will awaken to find they have communism, end of quote. I'll show this if you can see it. I'm not for sure. There it is, I think. Maybe, I don't like to talk about it. I think, let me take a snapshot of that and you can see on there. Also, just look at that. When Ronald Reagan had said this, and it was out, I read this from a reader that had quoted on this, looking at it much later. This was given in 1961, and I'll read this real quick. From a reader, everything Mr. Reagan touches on in his presentation is happening today in the year 2016, as if he had a crystal ball back then that told him exactly the condition of America in the 21st century if these evils were continued to be ignored by American citizens. And when I state everything, I mean everything. Please tell others to listen to this 1961 presentation. And he ended it with Semper Fi. We will take America without firing a shot. We do not have to invade the US. We will destroy it from within. Doses of socialism. This is dated several years ago. In a new recent poll, it was revealed that 70%, I think 2020, that 70% of millennials aged 24 through 39 say they would vote for a socialist. Well, many of them are voting for socialists. We have avowed socialists and even a few jihadists, 4 or 5 of them in Congress. The YouGov Victims of Communism Memorial Foundation found in their poll that 50% of millennials, again, same age, and 51% of Generation Z, age 16 to 22, have a somewhat or very unfavorable view of capitalism. I have given you the definitions in the past of communism. Let me do that and I'll try to finish out. Key differences between socialism and communism. Under communism, people are compensated or provided for based on their needs. Remember, you have to have needs. And if you look at North Korea and you look at China, you look at Russia, some of these nations, the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. So keep that in mind. If those thinking you're getting something for free, you're not going to be a part of them. You're going to be part of those lower tiers. There is no middle class. They're compensated and provided for based on their needs. In a pure communist society, the government provides most or all food, clothing, housing, and other necessities based on what it considers, the government, to be the needs of the people. You don't have a say-so in it. Just the few elite, that 1%. Socialism is based on the premise, it ain't, of the people will be compensated based on their level of individual contribution to the economy. So for those that want things free college, free tuition, free medical, free food, socialism says we're going to give you based on what you contribute to the economy. If you're sitting at home on your sofa doing nothing, you're going to get nothing. Venezuela is a nation that I had dealings with several years back. They were one of the richest nations in that area, tremendous oil reserves, wealth. It was like a pearl in that area. Socialism took over, and today it's a completely different poverty-stricken country. The necessities, even diapers and medical, you can't get them. The shelves are empty. That is socialism. So when you're thinking that things are going to be great, you are deceived. Under communism, most property and economic resources are owned by the state rather than individual citizens. Under socialism, here's the other one, all citizens supposedly share equally in all economic resources allocated by, it says, a democratically elected government. We have seen these regimes rig every election and threaten people with their life and have soldiers at the polling. So these are not democratically elected leaders. Neither of these reward the hardworking citizens. They don't. So why do people risk everything all over the world, flocking to our shores? Because of the American dream. If you work hard, you can have a better way of life. Don't blame it on the government. Don't blame it on a racial group. You have an opportunity. So let me show you this group, and then I'm at the end. These are the countries that practice socialism, strict communism, or a communism that is not Marxist-Leninist. So show it to you one more time. These are the nations, pure communist. Russia, even though they say they're not, they should be right there. So Vietnam, Zambia, North Korea, Portugal, Sri Lanka, Laos is communist, Greece Socialist Party, Ethiopia Socialist Party, El Salvador, Cuba's communist, China's communist. So I've told you before, and I'll just show you one last picture in a minute. This is their playbook for America. Healthcare, control healthcare, you control the people. What are we seeing today? And I'll say this about the vaccine. If you take it, that's your decision. I pray for those, that you have no side effects. If you don't take it, I pray for you, because I know and I believe in your freedom of choice. I believe this hollow Humpty Dumpty has overreached, along with his entire fake administration, illegitimate administration. They're all in on it. By the way, people don't think this is possible. They purposely are trying to destroy this nation. I hope you understand that. Don't write me. I don't care if you write me or not. I'm just going to discard it. They're purposely trying to destroy this nation. If you can't see it, you need to wake up, because it can be too late for you and for us. Healthcare, class warfare. I'll stop on this one. Gun control. There's another one they're trying to pass in California and other places. Debt, education, Common Core. Oh, there it is. So back to communism. Then I'll show you this. This was in an article. Found interesting in 1959, September 10th, 1959, part 3. Never underestimate an enemy. Nikita Khrushchev in particular, Los Angeles Times. So then they were criticizing communism. He is an enemy. He's trying to destroy this nation. And they were vehemently mad that he was coming to even welcomed into America. socialism, what is it? What do you mean, a part of this? And we know what California has become. Not all of it. There are some good people all over California. There's good people. Well, it's not the entire state. There are some wonderful. I have a good friend who's running for office in California. She is a tremendous candidate, and we need more like her. But this was then. Now, and there are certain pockets. I read the other day where people in San Francisco are fleeing because of the homelessness, feces in the street. Late says she goes out to her shop and has to clean up needles because police turn their eye to drug use in the streets. So division among the races. They divided in the Civil War, and as I said, over 600,000 died. They're trying the same playbook. This person said, we need to punish our enemies and get in their face. If they bring a knife to the fight, we bring a gun. End of quote. Then how to create a socialist state. This one is pigs in a blanket. Fry them like bacon. Marches, and that's what they were shouting. Pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon. And then unrest, social division. The people that are hurt, the people that are killed, the businesses that are destroyed, it's not those people over there that have guarded walls, have guards all around them. Even the congressional leaders walk around bodyguards, but they don't want us to have weapons or guns. But they do. At least they're bodyguards. They don't go anywhere without them. They get on flights and have 4 or 5 marshals with them. So they're the group that says do one thing and they do another. So this is what we're experiencing today. And if you don't think that there's a society, the highest level, that is seeking to have world dominance, and there is one country standing in their way. It's not England. It's not France. Certainly not Germany. They're a part of it. Canada. I mean, I love the Canadian people. The Royal Mounted Police, Prime Minister. There's one nation, the Eagle, founded on Judeo-Christian principles, seeking religious freedom from the King and from the Church of England. His patience is just about gone for the wicked. Their judgment's coming, and I'll talk a little bit about that hopefully on Thursday or following that. But there's grace and there's mercy for those that turn to him and those of us that follow Jesus Christ. Lord, I did what you asked me to do again. It's those that have ears, let them hear. Those that have an understanding, may they understand. Those that you can speak to them and they won't hear, Lord, it's not for them. But I have done, as you said, to warn the people. And I don't do this because I have strength or because I have courage or because I'm anything other than just a vessel yielded to you. It's your strength. It's your courage. And they're your visions. These are yours and your words. Help me to continue to just submit myself, Lord, in every area to you and to love you with all my heart, all my being, as well as my bride, Kimberly, and Luke, the scholar that you love so much. We love you. The people that watch that have a true and genuine heart, they love you, Jesus. And this is the time for them of refreshing. I pray that you give me an opportunity to give them an encouraging word, Lord, as we head into 2022. I love you, Lord. We love you. Thank you again. As I said, it's always an honor to be with you and share this time with you. I do pray, as I say each and every time, for you individually. I spend, well, my family does a lot of time in prayer, and then afterwards hours in prayer and just talking with the Lord and praying for this nation. Um, it's the one light in a world of darkness, or it's a dimming light in the world of darkness. I pray for your families, so many that you have written about, and so many that are on my heart. And of course, I pray for the great eagle, the United States of America. Thank you again. Until I see you the next time, may peace and may joy and blessings be upon you.